All right, everyone. Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. I'm always excited to have my special guest here, Howard, on the channel. Dr. Howard Asher is a licensed psychotherapist in California, which I think is actually important for some of the things we may talk about, Howard, that you live in California, with a clinical practice in the Los Angeles area. With his uncommon sense, out-of-the-box perspective on people in the world, Dr. Asher lectures on compelling topics of our times. He is also a consultant to many business sectors, including the media. And Howard is the author of the book A Loose Grip, which you can find out more about at aloosegripbook.com. I think I've put it in the description below. Howard, welcome back to my channel.
Hello. It's good to be back, and there's never an end to what we can talk about. My feeling is like, welcome to the revolution.
It's absolutely insane. And I feel like, we started having, this is our third series in a series of conversations about Trump Derangement Syndrome being a real thing from a psychological perspective. And, we started having these before all this chaos erupted. And I feel like, Howard, we are living in a time where Trump Derangement Syndrome has just turned the world on its head, so far as I'm concerned.
It did. It's particularly significant right now because, in a way, you can maybe look away from Trump derangement and see what's going on in the streets. And I would like to point out there's a huge connection. I woke up today and I started thinking about the Who's song "Won't Be Fooled Again."
Okay.
Are you old enough?
I am not, but lay it on me.
Well, the last line is haunting, and they only say it once. I thought they repeated it over and over again, but the last line sort of goes on. There's a instrumental kind of a haunting thing going on, and it says, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." So what we have is a revolution going on. And the idea with a revolution is you're going to turn everything around and you're going to make things better. But the real question is, are we? Are we going to make things better? I think you can point to the American Revolution and you can say that was an astounding thing that had happened. But what's happening in the streets is they're saying, no, that wasn't a good idea. We're going to rip it out from the root. We're going to burn the books. We're going to get rid of the movies. We're going to take the statues down. And we're going to do it mob style, which is a revolution.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if they have their way, you have to wonder if they have their way, they're just going to be the new boss. They're going to be same as the old boss.
I mean, that's a brilliant quote to start it off with, because I completely agree. I think that what we're witnessing right now is an absolute power play. And we've seen this in the Chaz or the CHOP in Seattle, where they created this autonomous zone. And what did they do immediately? They put themselves in positions of power. They literally built a wall. They became their own band of police. They put themselves in power. They were recreating what they were alleging that they were fighting against. So this is not about, I don't believe this is about defeating Donald Trump at this point. I don't believe this is about creating a more fair and just society. I think that this is a group of people who are using George Floyd's tragic death as an opportunity to try to take power.
It's exactly what happened. It's not about Black lives. It wasn't ever about Black lives. It was about the revolution. And George Floyd, of course, the incident was obvious. There was no controversy about how horrific it was. But they wanted to pin that onto the old society. Said, look, you see, here's what the old society does. No, the new society will do it too. They already have a murder rate in CHOP, or whatever it's called, CHOP. So they're going to bring on new things and in their own way. And is it going to be any better? And, I have an answer for it. You have an answer for it. And your intelligent viewers have an answer for that. It's going to be the same.
I actually think it's going to be worse.
Yes, it's going to be.
I think it's going to be worse. It's going to be significantly worse. Howard, we're getting put against the wall. You know that.
Yes. And so, what are we to do? It's in our hands. We could be spectators, and as spectators, we'll say, "Well, look at society. I hope things turn around." the only way they turn around is with us. We are a government of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
people get that.
I think that critical to this equation is, frankly, waking up good people who have Trump derangement syndrome. I honestly believe that, because I think that we need to separate the people that are leading this revolution into two different groups. I think we have people that are doing it because they fundamentally well, actually, I'm going to start with the bad people first. I'm going to start with the people that I'm actually most afraid of. There are people that frankly are actual communists, actual socialists, actual Marxists, whatever label you want to put on them, that all they are interested in is gaining power by any means necessary. And what is the old adage, right? Like you should never give power to people who want it. Those people are the most dangerous people to have power in the world,
That's right.
because they're just going to abuse it. Those people are terrifying to me. But I truly believe that those people are a very, very small portion of the overall population that's in with this right now. I mean, I don't know exactly a percentage, but I think that's a very, very tiny percentage. I believe that most of the people that are buying into what is going on right now are people that are fundamentally good people that somewhere along the way, and it may have started with Trump's election, it may have started before it, but somewhere along the way, they became convinced that the only way to be a good person was to go along with this ideology. And of course, this ideology reinforces that. It says that you are the good people and they are the bad people. You are the good people who want justice and equity, and you want a fair and just society. And all of those other people, all of those Trump supporters, are bad people, and they just want the white man to reign supreme. And I think we need to separate those two out, because I think there is a lot of opportunity to wake up the people that think they're in it for the right reasons, and to have them come to a place where they can acknowledge that what is going on is not going to create a more fair and just society. What do you think?
What you just said, when people look at this live stream and they can go over a section of it, they need to go over what you just said. That's exactly what's going on. It's power for power's sake, ideology. It's not to help any faction of society. It's to gain power and keep power. And I wrote my book that we make our decisions based on fashion. And a lot of people don't understand the power of fashion. Fashionably, I want to be a good person. If I do that, I need to be against evil people. An evil person is Trump, after all. Look at who he is. So how could it be that, someone like Trump could be a part of anything that's good? I'm writing a follow-up thing, and I'm in a section where I'm writing about Oskar Schindler. Schindler was a profiteer during World War II. Schindler was out to make money. Schindler cared about himself, and he exploited, population that was being persecuted, Jews. And I think most people have seen Spielberg's movie Schindler's List. Side note, I like movies a lot because whether the movies are accurate, they make me know about a subject that I otherwise didn't know about, and then I do my own research on it. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that it shows that Schindler did a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing, but he wasn't a good person.
Yeah.
And I think we need to take that from this. The statues are coming down because I saw a piece where the author of Old Yeller has a statue, and it's a beautiful statue, and they want to take it down because his father owned a slave. So the sins of the father have to, go on the sin. It has to be the sins of the son as well. And you could see this purity that's happening. It's like, well, we have to be good. We have to be good. Well, what's going to happen is the founders of the revolution in the streets, sooner or later, those heads they're going to meet the guillotine themselves. It always works out that way because nobody can be pure. So it's important that we get a takeaway that these statues are not, certainly some of them glorify something, some aspect of a person or something about history. But I'm sorry, a side note, but it just strikes me right now. So in Lincoln Park, I didn't know there was a statue, and it's of Abraham Lincoln, and the mob wants to tear it down. It does look like a condescending statue. You have Abraham Lincoln standing tall, and you have a black slave kneeling down in front of him or beside him or something like that. Now, the imagery actually it's not off. If you think about the president who actually did something about that, the imagery would be these were oppressed people, and it's not that this is a lesser man. This was oppressed man. So you could reason that it's not such an offensive statue. However, you could also read that it's a very offensive statue. Imagine this, that because we're evolving our ideas, there would be another statue that would go beside it with an explanation of how we've evolved. And it would be Lincoln standing tall with a black man and a woman, a black man and a woman, because it's not just man on man. And that the black man and the woman and Lincoln are grasping hands like this, saying that this is maybe what should have been the first statue. But the first statue was made in its time. And now we're in these times. Imagine the historical benefit that people who saw this, kids and adults, would understand this kind of thing. I'm so frightened that these statues are being torn down.
Yeah. I think it's awful. I love your notion of like, let's have an evolution to this, because America for me it's a constant work in progress, right? We are not perfect now. We will never reach a state of perfection. That's just not the way the world works. But we started in a place and we got a little bit better. And we got a little bit better after that. And then we had founders who even though many of them owned slaves, they spoke out against slavery, and they actually put systems in place to try to dismantle slavery. We saw that with Thomas Jefferson, right? Thomas Jefferson was not in favor of slavery, but he couldn't dismantle the system at the drop of a hat just because he wanted to. There needed to be other systems in place to allow for that, and he facilitated that. And so it keeps getting a little bit better. And this idea of an evolution rather than just let's rip down all of our history. I mean, with the pulling down of the statues, and I would never call myself a fan of the Confederacy and having those statues in the first place, but the reality is that is our history. And when we're pulling it down, when we're pretending that we can just wash it away, when we're pulling down a statue, it just reeks of 1984 to me. It's very Orwellian. He who controls the present controls what is it? He who controls the past controls the present. Something like that.
I'm with you, of course. If you need something that really rallies you, consider whether you want to live in a country that's run by the mob. As simple as that. Nothing that the mob does leads to anything that's good. The mob can even start off with a cause that's legitimate, but the mob will ruin it. The mob will always ruin it. And it's interesting because this was said before when they started to talk about Confederate statues. There were voices that said, "Well, when's it going to end?" I mean, this was predicted. Are we going to tear down George Washington?
Trump even predicted it.
Oh,
Trump
sure.
predicted it several years ago.
Absolutely, because you could see it going. Because once you look the other way and you say, well, there was a reason why the mob did what they did, so we have to give it legitimacy. Once you give the mob legitimacy, you've lost your country. End of subject. And we have the thing is, we're watching the mob right now, but a lot of us are participating with the mob.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I just don't understand, Howard, and perhaps you could shed some light in this, is what would drive people to give the mob legitimacy. I mean, I look at the mayor of Seattle, who was like, this is just going to be a summer of love, when they literally took over the entire downtown of the city, maybe not the entire downtown, but a good percentage of the downtown. And she just said, oh, let the kids play. It's going to be a summer of love. What would drive her to do that?
It's a street festival. So what drives it is obviously stupidity. I mean, you got to have a healthy dose of stupidity, cowardice, and I just want to be with the fashionable woke. Okay, I mean, this before the term woke was the term politically correct. Okay, and Bill Maher even had a show a long time ago called Politically Incorrect. And what he was trying to do, and to his credit, but I think he's gone in a different direction ultimately, is he attacked the idea that, what do you mean politically correct? You mean there's a way you're supposed to think about something, and if you don't think about something that way, then you're less than human. Well, these politicians don't want to be seen as less than human. The last time we talked, I tried to neutralize the term racism. Racism is the worst term anyone can ever be called. Imagine if you take the power out of that term. So that so they don't want to be called racist, they don't want to be called unwoke, and so they go along with the mob. Trump, to his credit, whether you like him or not, he says this is nonsense. This is BS. And this is what resonates with Trump. This is why you could look at, it's the Oscar Schindler effect. It's like, okay, all the stuff that he is in terms of his personal life, but I'll tell you, when it comes down to it, he saves lives. End of subject. That's all that matters. And when people wonder on the left, or liberals who have friends, and they go, I don't understand why you support Trump or like Trump or don't say bad things about Trump. The answer is this: it's because he does things that move in the direction of what really matters, not what doesn't matter.
Well, and I think one of the reasons I think that waking up people who have Trump Derangement Syndrome is so critical to all of this is that they are allowing their perception of Trump to basically blind them to the larger, much more important issues that are impacting our society. I mean, if you think about it, like, one of the reasons I've actually been very upset with Trump, to be honest, is I don't perceive him to be doing anything about any of this. I think that he could be speaking up. I think that he could be much more vocal than he's being, and I want to see him doing more about this. But that's not happening. But when people, at least the people on the left that I know, like the good Democrats, I'm going to call them, the people who are just going along with this because they think it makes them a better person or a good person, and they don't want to be a bad person. When I look at them, it's like they're letting their judgment of Donald Trump cloud their reason. And I have an example of this. Can I show you my example?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, let me share my screen, and I'll get it on my screen. So this is something that I saw posted on my Facebook yesterday by the husband of my state representative, my local state representative. And it actually ended up, I left a very nice comment on it saying, I don't think this is true. And I'll read this out for people who can't see it. And it actually led to my state representative calling me a Karen and blocking me on Facebook, which I thought was kind of funny. But I mean, this image is real. This is how Democrats view conservatives or people on the right. And so if anyone can't read it, it says, "This is America. Love it or leave it, snowflake. Gays can get married and adopt children. That's the law. Brown people were here before us and will be here after us. Better get used to it. The Affordable Care Act is the law. Tough S, your pre-existing conditions are covered. It's illegal to discriminate based on sex, race, or nationality. Go cry me a river. If you don't like it, leave it. This is America." And so what they're doing is they're basically saying that everyone who is on the Republican side or on the Trump supporter side, they don't believe in any of these things. And that is fundamentally not true. I mean, I went to CPAC in February. I went to the very mecca of conservatives in February. And you know who the stars were at CPAC? It was people like Diamond and Silk. Two Black women were absolute, I mean, rock stars. They actually had to have security following them around at CPAC because so many people wanted to talk to them. So many people wanted to take pictures of them. I look at people like Brandon Strzok and Scott Pressler, who are both very gay men, and they were just beloved at CPAC, and no one cared if they got married. No one cared if they adopted children. I look at someone like, Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin actually has a video on his channel of him and his husband talking about when they met Donald Trump, and they told Trump that they were married, and Trump was like, he slaps the table and he's like, "That's just great. I think it's great that you two are married, and I never gave an S about you guys getting married." And right. It's just like, these things are just fundamentally not true. But until people on the good Democrats, again, I'll use that term, the good Democrats wake up and realize that the conservatives, the right, these are not your enemies. They agree with you on these things. How can we get them to wake up, Howard?
That's really hard because people just don't know it. They either see it or they don't believe it, or they think they're being lied to, or there's some kind of resistance. I wrote something in my book that said, whether you agree with Trump or not, he's actually good for the things that you'd like to do, even the things he doesn't agree with. In other words, he's cleared the board. So a lot of people can come in, make their best case for their ideologies. And there's been never a better time for this. So that's what makes the mob particularly heinous, because there's no need for it. Mm-hmm. The amount of access you have with social media, people have more access to different ideas. But the woke, remember, they're in one of their the primary things that they do is they cancel, they censor. Mm-hmm. So what are they going to censor? If the ultimate goal is power, you don't want to give any reason to the other side. You don't want the other side to think, well, wait, they have a point. And by the way, they're not racist. If anything, their causes, their policies promotes the kinds of things that you otherwise would have wanted.
Right.
So there's a twisted ideology or logic that's going on. So it's a perfectly good question. That is, how can you get the general public to realize that conservative people aren't racist, they're not against gays, all those issues. And unfortunately, that's failed so far. Maybe, just maybe, through what we're doing right now, people start scratching their head and saying, I didn't know that.
Right. And I remember back to when I first started waking up to this, because for those of you who maybe are new to me or haven't tuned in before, I had Trump Derangement Syndrome. I absolutely had it. I cried the day that Trump was elected. I remember I went to bed early on election night because I could see where it was going and I didn't want to see it. And I'd already had an entire bottle of champagne and I was like, I can only take so much. And I woke up the next day and I confirmed that Trump won the election, and I cried and I had a breakdown and I was just so upset. And I had Trump Derangement Syndrome for a good 2 to 3 years. And what woke me up was, it was first seeing social justice take over my knitting community and basically spoil my knitting community. And when that happened, I started looking around for people that I challenged myself to consider people that I thought I would disagree with. So I started listening to voices that were very conservative. I started with Ben Shapiro, and I listened to a lot of Joe Rogan's podcasts. I listened to a lot of Dave Rubin's stuff. And I just started listening to these voices I thought I would disagree with. And lo and behold, it turns out that they weren't against gay marriage, and they weren't racist, and they weren't saying anything that was outlandish and bad. And it was something I had just never considered before as a possibility. And when I found this out, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is really good news. Conservatives are not racist. They're not homophobic. They're not bad people. But here's where I'm going with this. It seems as though the good Democrats need to see conservatives as bad, angry people. And so if you say to them, they're really not homophobic, they don't care about gay marriage, they really, really don't care, they don't want, it's like they can't even process it. It's like, well, they're bad people, so they must hate gay marriage, they must be against Black people or whatever it is. It's like they don't see it as a good, positive evolution of our society, that this party that really was once against gay marriage and was against these things has evolved into something different.
Yeah, you just said something that's really key, and that is when you found out that, oh my gosh, they're not against, the things. You were glad. You said, that's nice. There's another type of person who thought the way you thought, would hear that and they wouldn't be happy. They had the opposite effect. They said, oh my God. So then they have to do some kind of mental gymnastics to explain that what they're seeing isn't really true.
Right.
I mean, and that's the issue. I mean, you just looked at it and you said, I'm happy. There's the incident, the noose incident with the NASCAR person.
Yep.
Now, there's something that's happened. There's a pattern that's been going on that anytime there's a news story, it ultimately turns out to be a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're developing any kind of prejudice, you start to get skeptical that anytime there's a noose involved, it's not what you think it is. So I guess they did a deep dive and they discovered that it wasn't a noose. It was some kind of a rig to bring down the garage door. Yeah, and they were common. And instead of the I don't know the guy's name, Bubba, whatever the race car driver's name is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say anything that's not true. So, but I don't know if he. I think he said that if anyone doesn't believe that this noose was real, they're racist. And then he found out that it wasn't. And I don't know if he apologized for it and said, okay, now, first of all, I'm glad that it wasn't a noose. That's what I didn't hear anything about. And so I guess if we're looking at the lay of the land and seeing how people are moving in this political direction, pay attention to the people who aren't glad to find out that conservatives are decent people.
Mm-hmm.
They have different policies, they have different ideas, but to the core, they're not against the things that you're for.
Right.
And are you glad, or are unhappy about it? That's will tell you a lot.
Right. I mean, and I think an argument that I'm trying to advance is that the woke, they're addicted to being angry. They're addicted to outrage. And I just had this call with my locals group right before this. And one of the things that we talked about is, let's just posit a magical reality in which I could wave a magic wand and give every single person who's out protesting and rioting their absolutely perfect communist society, and it's communism done the right way, and everyone is happy and everyone has everything they need, and the world is a fair and just and equal place, and I can wave that magic wand and give them exactly what they say they want, which I don't think is actually what they want, but let's live in the land of make-believe for a second.
Right.
And it's done. They are still going to find reasons to be upset, because it is not about the outcome. The outcome does not matter. It is about feeding this addiction to being outraged. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Am I off base there?
No, it's outrage for outrage purpose. They're really good at it. And what they're doing is they're using people who, I'm what category to refer to it just in this part of the discussion, but people who have like decent ideas, who may not like Trump or who are liberal Democrats, and those people, they're using those people to join into their outrage. And the George Floyd thing was perfect. It was perfect because you can get anybody to go, this was really messed up, this was really bad, this is why those statues have to come down. This is, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I guess the less enlightened people, I'm trying to be nice about this, would say, no, I could see why some of those statues need to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, to those people, I would say that's fine. Not by the mob, though.
Yeah.
Anything the mob's involved with, you need to distance yourself from that as far as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't even know if I would agree with that, though, because I do agree with it. I do agree that nothing should be taken down because of a mob wanting to do it. But then I look at, I think it's in New York, they've actually voted to take down a statue of Thomas Jefferson. They voted to do it. And I'm like, that's not cool either. That is the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, yeah, but here's the thing. I would prefer that it be done that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could say shame on the
well,
vote.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just, I guess I want to put a flag in this. I've got a real problem with the mob. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I also have a problem with bad voting. I mean, I'm always going to have a problem with.
They're
bad
different
voting.
problems, though.
Yeah, they are. They're different problems, and you deal with the bad voting in a different way. Like again, I'm glad to hear you say. It's nice to hear agreement. It's every now and then we need it, but that I wouldn't want those statues to come down either. But the idea, like I was making a recommendation with the Lincoln statue, is like, you know, maybe having another evolved statue alongside of it teaches a lot more than just taking stuff down.
Mm-hmm. Well, but that goes back to the goal, right? The goal is not teaching. The goal is not to create a more fair and just society. The only goal is to take the current people who are in power, take them out of power, and put these and replace them. That's what it is.
Well, there's a dual goal. The first one is what you said. You know, it's all about power. Then the follow-up goal is, look, you see how good I am? I'm a woke person. I don't want to have statues of Jefferson. He held slaves. So to me, it's a dual goal.
Howard, have you seen this in people you've treated in terms of being addicted to these outrage emotions? And if so, how do you help them overcome that addiction?
Well, you know, it's like the old joke about you know, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, you can't change a light bulb unless it wants to be changed.
That's the truth, isn't it? You can lead a horse to water, but it doesn't make it a duck.
Right. So, you know, I'm confronted all the time, just like you are, with ideas that I think are really destructive and stupid and foolish and all of that. And I'm not one to jump in front of somebody and say, that's a really stupid idea. You're foolish and all that. I don't do that. Because
you want people to have that revelation on their own. And sometimes the best teacher is failure.
Yeah. So what I do is I would confront I would encounter somebody, particularly my practice says, who would say, I'm having a hard time with, and then they fill in the blank. That now gives me an opportunity to say, well, let's deconstruct how you came to these conclusions, and let's see if there's a flaw in them. And then that's the person who's the light bulb who wants to be changed says, yeah, let's do that. If there's a flaw in the way I've reasoned, I'm all ears. And that's how it's done. And it's actually pretty simple. And even when I'm talking with people who the implication is they want my input, while I'm talking to them, I'll ask them, do you want my advice? I don't assume they want to hear it. Even if they've walked into my office, I say, well, do you want my advice? Here's what I think about what it is you've laid out. And it's wonderful to see the light bulb go off. They say, I've never heard it that way. That makes a lot of sense. Oh my God, I can't believe I thought whatever I thought for however long I thought it. And that's how you bring about change. I mean, again, I'm focusing on mobs. I'm not a mob in their face.
Right.
I'm not screaming at them. I'm not calling them names. Unless I have their permission to do that.
Well, I think that this is actually a really critical point because in the workplace, so there's research to say, you know, feedback is one of the most fear-inducing terms you can hear in the workplace. Where if someone thinks they're about to get some feedback from like their boss or someone else, their entire sympathetic nervous system like lights up like a Christmas tree, and they go into like fight or flight in anticipation of getting this feedback because they think it's going to be bad. So a trick that I always teach people, and there's actually neuroscience research to back this up by a guy named David Rock, is he found that if you can get someone to ask for feedback, it takes care of that. So even if it's just as simple as like, I'm your boss and I go to you and I say, Howard, ask me for feedback. And you say, can I have some feedback? That is actually the answer to making the person more receptive to feedback, even though it's just like, it's a really simple trick of getting them to ask for it.
Absolutely. It's all about receptivity. Most people don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Or because they're afraid.
Yeah, they're afraid. They're set in their ways. It's comfortable for them. It's not convenient to be thrown something they have to think about and rethink something. I mean, how many things might they have to rethink if they've discovered one thing that's flawed? So nobody's looking for it. Ostensibly, nobody's looking for it. Actually, I'm always looking for it. But I fall into the trap of being very comfortable with how I think, liking what I think, embracing what I think. And wouldn't it be really inconvenient if I was told that I was wrong about that? And
can be incredibly inconvenient, I'll tell you what.
yeah, it is. And there's a cost to it. You lose friends, you lose a job. So those are the forces that you're up against. But whatever that can be conveyed to say, the thing that the truth will set you free, a cliche like that. Let's take a deep breath. Worst case, I got it wrong. Worst case, I got it wrong. Better case is I caught it.
Yeah.
And that's what you appeal to with people. And the thing is, no matter how out there somebody is with their crazy thoughts, if you can get them to calm down, if you can do a one-on-one with somebody and you can say, look, are you interested in making a world that's as good as it possibly can for you, as well as for all the people you care about? Who's going to say no to that?
Right. So we have a super chat from JV, and JV says, "Can you also keep in mind that that they keep denying reverse racism? I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm honestly afraid this time of the mentality will affect our mental health institutions. I'm incredibly afraid of what's going on. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, simply because every organization that I know of is assigning their employees to read it, is White Fragility.
Right.
That cursed, awful book. What are your thoughts about White Fragility, Howard?
Well, I mean, it's another form of forcing people and to demonstrate their purity on an issue and to qualify them to be allowed to work. I think it's horrific. I think that the companies are cowards. I think that they don't do it because they really believe in the philosophies that they're espousing. I think they're doing it so they can check it off to say that we are sensitive and we care about certain issues that are considered decent, and we only associate with people that we hold to those standards. When like in the media, there might be like an anchor or a commentator get in trouble because they say something. It's I can't think offhand the last one, but what happens is they could either be fired or they could be suspended for a time. And there's a statement that comes out from the company saying, we don't hold these ideas. And the implication is that there's this unified idea. And I mean, it's understandable, like if someone on their platform is saying things and they don't agree with it or don't like it or find it offensive. But I don't think it's usually not dealt with in a individualized kind of way, in a nuanced kind of way, the kind of way I would prefer. it's usually dealt with that we hold certain ideas and we only associate with people in our employ who are employed with us who
Right.
have those same ideas. And
Right.
I'm saying, oh, great. So you just hire stupid people who go along with the way you think.
Well,
I'm not interested in those people.
and it's not even that. I mean, this is incredibly destructive to organizations. And one of the reasons that I absolutely detest Robin DiAngelo so much and what she's doing and the impact that she's having on the world is that her book teaches that all white people are racist. All white people are racist. And then she tries to couch it. She's like, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just the reality of being born white is that you're going to be inherently racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. But then, I mean, then if that's true, if it's true that it doesn't make you a bad person, then why is everyone getting fired for stepping out of line? Because it's not true, and she knows it's not true. This is the thing that really gets me. She absolutely understands that throwing these terms around is nothing more than a power play, because no one's viewing someone as like the good kind of racist. It's
Sure.
like, I think it was I want to say it was James Lindsay who said recently, like, there are only two types of white people in Robin DiAngelo's world. There's white people who confess their sins and admit they're racist, and there's white people who are racist and don't confess their sins and
Sure.
admit that and there's no other option.
I don't know who I detest more, whether it's people like her who write that kind of nonsense, or whether it's the people who give her a platform to say it.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think maybe I'm leaning toward the people who give a platform. I'm for freedom of speech. If she's got an idea that she wants to sell, I think that's fine. My issue is the people who buy into it.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And you know what the thing is that really drives me crazy about organizations is they don't even buy into it. They do not buy into it. Maybe they have some HR person that does or some diversity and inclusion person that does, but the executives, they don't care about this stuff. This is not, I mean, except maybe Jack at Twitter, but this is not part of, they don't buy into it at all. They're just doing it so that they can say that they did something and so they don't get attacked by the mob. That's all it is. It's actual cowardice. If I could, like, point me out to a company that has stood up and said, we support, of course, we are open to all types of employees, blah, 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 have a general diversity statement, but we do not support white fragility and anti-racist training because it is not anti-racist training. Point me to that organization that issues that statement. That organization is going to make a boat ton of money from conservatives.
It's funny that you're saying that. There are a few companies that actually do push against this woke nonsense.
Which ones?
Mike Lindell has a company, My Pillow. He's all over Fox.
Yes, I love Mike Lindell. Yes.
And he was told, he took a hard position on a lot of things. He's pro-Trump. He talks about his personal story where he was a coke addict, and he found his way, he claims, through his faith, found Jesus and all of that. So I think that's terrific for him. And of course, there are people who would just say he's a freak and he's just conservative, right winger and all that. And they said, you're running a company. If you keep doing this, you're going to lose business.
Right.
And he said, no, I'm going to do what I do. And I think his business is flourishing. Now, I haven't seen his books, but the word is he's doing just fine. And I think there's other companies that do that too. And I think that from a marketing perspective, a lot of companies are missing the boat by going the way that you were just suggesting. I think there's money in it.
I think there is too. I think that we talked about this already, but I think that the people that actually buy into this are a very, very small percentage of the population. And yet you've got everyone catering to them. And I have more thoughts about how this is affecting the workplace in a sec, but I want to get to Lowe's super chat. Lowe's says, any advice on how not to be such a doomer? Because for the first time in my life, I'm thinking of getting the hell out of Dodge. And I think that the reason I wanted to take that super chat is that's something I'm seeing come up an awful lot is people just saying, this is impossible. This is overwhelming. And even I felt overwhelmed. I have to tell you, like, I just did this group call, less than 2 hours ago, and I had all of these parents telling me, Carlin, the schools changed my kids. The things that the schools taught my kids fundamentally changed them. And now I can't say anything because if I do, I'm going to rip apart my family. And that's the choice that a lot of people feel like they're making, is the choice between having a relationship with their children and speaking up. And it felt, in that moment when I had these people articulating it to me, it felt incredibly overwhelming, because it was like, how do you deconstruct not only higher education, because I think higher education should be burnt to the ground, not literally YouTube, but figuratively.
Right.
But it goes all the way back.
Right. I wish there was an easy answer to this. And as I'm saying that, I'm also thinking there is an easy answer. So let me try to develop this idea. I think whenever you're in a group and the group seems to have a mobbish kind of discussion, and you can tell that if you speak up, you're going to be the enemy of the mob. I think it's legitimate to decide for your own survival whether you want to get into it with any of these people. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any problem with somebody laying low. Mm-hmm. But whenever I could find myself in a situation like that, I do look for an opportunity where something is said, that I say something not complicated but simple. Something like, well, there's a lot of ways to think about that. Something gets said and people are very emphatic about it. Mm-hmm. And instead of saying, I disagree, you say, well, there's a lot of ways to think about that. And the purpose of that, it would be just to sort of bring the conversation to a pause, because, it has too much energy where, they want to burn people at the stake.
Right.
So I would have your viewers think about, how can you bring a discussion to a pause where you say something that's actually not controversial? There are a lot of ways to think about something. And try testing that to just bring the temperature down. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good point. And that actually overlaps with a question that I got in my locals community for this conversation. Before we do that, I just want to say thank you, Kristen, for the super chat. Kristen says, thank you, Dr. Carlin and Dr. Howard, for your continuous level-headed discussions. Please keep it up. We plan to keep it up and hopefully bring more people into the conversation, because both Howard and I think that this is really critically important for people to be having these conversations. And actually, this is a good chance for this super chat as well. Arista asks, I need advice on my role as a therapist around this topic. I want to feel confident in my approach and free them from any brainwashing, but with respect. And Howard, that seems to be exactly what you were hitting on, with giving the conversation a chance to pause.
Yeah, as a therapist, there are certain areas that you, what's a good way of putting this? You don't go promoting politics. You don't promote your politics as a therapist.
No.
You don't promote your religion as a therapist. And there are probably some other things. Politics and religion are like, no. Now, the interesting thing about that is that if you're working with somebody in a full scope of things that they're dealing with, politics and religion can come up. For example, I'll be working with someone and they may be Mormon. Mm-hmm. Now, just that a Mormon would be in my office is kind of notable. Mormons don't use, I hope this will sound stereotypic, I can't help it. Mm-hmm. But I don't expect Mormons to walk into my office. But I have had more than a few Mormons walk into my office because they've heard about me. And they'll say, I'm going through a lot of difficulties. I drink, so they're Mormon. There may be some other dogmatic things that they have difficulties with, and they have a family. And within their family, there's all kinds of range. It could be devout, they could be whatever. Anyway, they're struggling with it. Well, as a therapist, now you're not supposed to get into religion, right?
Right.
But there you are. It's you can't walk away from an issue that way, like that either. They're coming for help. So there's a door you can walk through, which is basically, okay, you have a religious issue or crisis that you're going with. What does your gut tell you about how to handle that? So you're putting it in there, you know. Do you struggle with the doctrine of your religion? Do you understand the doctrine of religion? Have you studied with somebody that you respect in your religion? Okay. So you can see that you're full on discussing religion, but from a therapeutic point of view.
Yeah.
The same thing comes up with politics. And what you do is you explore how people get to their conclusions. You don't tell them what their politics should be. You tell them that there's an end mark you want to reach where it has reason, satisfaction, and gratification to you. Can you get that through your politics? That's a perfectly legitimate therapeutic way to approach those issues.
And it sounds like what you're doing is you're really kind of trying to peel back the layers of the problem just one by one, because I know when I'm working with people, and I don't do therapy, I do coaching, so it's a little bit different. But whenever they come with a problem and they say, this is the problem, this is what I'm struggling with. Well, very rarely is that actually the problem.
Yes.
You kind of start there and you have to work your way back.
That's
right?
called the presenting problem, how they present it. Right. So I'm curious. So when you encounter that, what do you do?
Well, I think it's very similar. Is I ask them questions around the problem to try to ascertain, is it where is it coming from? And in a workplace context, which is where I spend most of my time, I usually find out something to the effect of, oh, it's not about your boss necessarily, putting so much work on you that you can't meet your deadline. It's about the fact that you had a negative interaction with your boss 3 months ago and you haven't worked through the problems yet. And you just kind of ask questions until you get people to have that own revelation from themselves. And I think that that's actually a really key part of this, is that you can't hand them the answer. Sometimes you can ask leading questions, because sometimes you're going to, if you're detached in the situation, sometimes you kind of have the epiphany of, this is where the problem came from. And you can kind of gently guide them there through the questions that you're asking, but you don't give them the answer, because that's not going to do them any good.
At the end, they need to be who they are.
Yeah.
And if you do anything that gets them away from who they are, you haven't done any help for them. Okay. You want them to be the best that they can be as who they are. And so the whole array of issues come up that are rather unavoidable, but you have to have a sense of therapeutic legitimacy when you talk with people.
And I think for me too, when I'm working with people that I might disagree with on things, it's really helpful. And one of the things I write about in my book actually is having a non-judgmental approach to situations. So not looking at a situation and saying, this is good or this is bad, really being very mindful of whatever judgments you're making about it, because the instant that you judge something as bad, and we can judge something as bad, and Howard, you can back me up here, things as bad in an instant, and we're not aware that we do it. And so you have to be very hyper mindful and aware of, what judgments am I placing on this situation? Am I disagreeing with this person and therefore thinking they're bad and wrong and I need to change them? Or am I just looking at them and saying, this is a human being who has these beliefs and this is where they are. And I don't need to, the more that, and I'm trying to speak not so much to you, but to like the average people listening right now to help them have a healthy sense of detachment. The more that you can realize that you're not in a competition with this person, it's not your job to convince them of anything. It is simply that you might have different positions, and that's because you're not running the same race. They're here to do different things in their life than you are there to do. And neither is good, neither is bad, neither is better, neither is worse. It just is. And the more that you can remove your personal judgment from the conversation, I really think that that's what gets in the way an awful lot, is that people are so focused on, I need to get this person to think like me. I need to get this person to agree with me. I need to get this person, I need to get this person to agree with me so that they can validate my beliefs.
That's so true. And therapists and people in your profession need to keep that in check. Let me throw a nuance at you. So I'll work with somebody and it goes well, and they're very pleased with the trajectory of our discussions and how it went. And they want to compliment me, and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. Asher, you're so incredible. You're just so not judgmental."
Mm.
Well, I'll sit up and I'll say, if I wasn't judgmental, how was I able to help you? So what I've tried to tell them is, I said, no, I'm very judgmental. What you really meant to say is, I'm not an a-hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny because I think that one of the reasons that that conservatives kind of like me, at least that I've ascertained, and please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about this, it's not necessarily, they know that I don't agree with them on a lot of things. They know that I'm not a conservative. They know that I didn't change my liberal values, but they like me because I have an open mind and because I'll listen to them.
Yes.
And that's actually the most important thing, is the listening.
It's key. There isn't anything beyond the listening. That's what's making the connection. When they can see, they can sense that you're with them on something, they're not even asking you to agree. So basically, I sort of come up with maybe a clever way of putting it, is that I'm judgmentally not judgmental. I want my judgment intact. I want to be able to I've worked hard on my judgments and assessments. I need to have them, but I don't want to be an a-hole about it. And that's what they're picking up on. It's always appreciated what they're saying, but I always want to give people the benefit of thinking as sharp as they possibly can. As sharp as they possibly can.
And to know too, and I think especially when you work with people like you and I do, over time you see that, listen, something that there are more than one ways to, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I know some people hate that saying, but sure, there is more than one way to go about something or approach something. And I see it all the time where my clients, they have a strategy and they want to do it. And in my head, I'm going, you're crazy. This is not going to work, but okay, let's go down this road. And I help them develop the strategy, and I help them, have the confidence to go out and do it. And then lo and behold, it actually works and it's really effective. And no one is more surprised than me, but also delighted that, they didn't have to do it my way to get to where they wanted to go. They just had to have confidence in themselves and prepare and execute.
It's exciting when that happens. I think when you're really doing the work right at the juncture point, when it means the most, you're up against something that's confounding. I was working with somebody yesterday who was going through horrible anxieties. We really had a hard time trying to to determine what was triggering them. And I had ideas and suggestions, but I could tell none of that was fitting. And it's wonderful to turn it over to the other person for the empowerment part of it and say, okay, look, you're me right now. What would you say to you? And the person came out with exactly what was the impact point of their therapy. And so it isn't having the answers as much as it is working the process of helping people filter things through, standing out of your own way so you can hear what's going on. And, being honest, when I'm good at what I do, but I'll be confounded. I go, this thing's not making sense. I don't understand it. Can you help me? Can you help me understand this better?
So it's like more of a co-creative process.
It absolutely is. It's teamwork. It's always teamwork.
Yeah. Arista has a follow-up question, and this is from our follow-up to the therapist question. I just worry about the effect that the cult thinking might be having on their mental health / sense of self when they bring up struggles with the anti-racist movement. And actually, this is perfect timing, because as Howard and I were just talking, I was in my head thinking that this is all the more reason for me to absolutely detest Robin DiAngelo and her strategy about this, because part of her whole thing is, it's funny. I was actually watching a clip of one of her trainings on Benjamin Boyce's channel the other day. Yeah. And she flat out says at the very beginning, if you are a white person, or, excuse me, I'm back up. She says, if you are a person of color, feel free to criticize me. If you are a white person, do not criticize me. You need to be humble and accept what I'm saying. And then, of course, we know, her strategy is essentially, if you push back, if you disagree with me, that is proof of your white fragility. And I think that goes right in line with Arista's question here, because the whole anti-racist movement and how it's manifesting, at least in workplaces where I'm seeing it, people are not allowed to question it. They are not allowed to push back. There is no detachment. There is no lack of judgment. It is entirely judgment.
No, it's airtight. I mean, that's what the witch trials were all about. Mm-hmm. If you sew a witch, or a person accused of being a witch, in a sack and throw them in the river, if they drown, they were pure.
Oops.
If they float, they're a witch. So that's what DiAngelo has set up. Is that heads you win, tails or whatever the
mm-hmm.
heads you wins, tails.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
That's right. Thank you for helping me. All of those arguments are set up that way so that if you actually try to grapple with it, you're a racist. Mm-hmm. So why go there if the end product is racism, and shame on them. I mean, shouldn't the end product be going to a place where you're not racist anymore? Well, how can you do that if you're going to end up being racist anyway?
Right. And that's the entire premise of this book, is that white people are racist. They have always been racist. They will always be racist. The only thing that they can maybe do to make it a little bit better is to pay Robin DiAngelo a lot of money and to sit in their discomfort and to have her lecture them about how racist they are. That is the only answer. And this is another thing too, and this is something I talked about it with Benjamin yesterday, but I really don't understand it, is that in these conversations, there is never talk about, okay, what do we actually do to dismantle systemic racism? And I think people in the chat are going to disagree with me. I think that there can be a case to be made that there are issues relating to racism that are systemic. I do, and I can give examples. I don't think it's as big of an issue as a lot of people do, but I actually absolutely think there are issues and things we could solve through evolution, like things you've talked about, right? Sure. About going to the next step. And but those conversations never happen because it's not about making things better. It is about shaming people.
Right. For me, it's all about the tail wagging the dog. Wherever you can find the horrible thing that they talk about, obviously shame on it. But I've never worried about it because I think it's very rare. Mm-hmm. Let me challenge the word systemic. Mm-hmm. I wish we could do away with it right now. But let me try to deal with it again in another nuanced way. I suppose somewhere out there you can find places where it's tied into the system. I don't think it happens very often, though.
I would agree with that. But can I give you my example?
Sure. Yeah. Give me the example.
Okay. And this is, again, sorry if you guys saw my conversation with Benjamin, because I'm going to repeat it. So when I was in college, many years ago now, 20 years ago, I went on alternative spring break one year. And what that basically is instead of going and having fun and drinking like normal college students, I went into community service for a week. And I went with a busload of people from Boston, and we drove down to rural Mississippi. Like literally we got out of the van and there was a Confederate flag in the town square. It was like that type of Mississippi. And we worked in the schools for a week. And there were 2 schools in the town that I was in. There was the public school, which was not very good, which is the one we worked in, which was almost entirely, it was like 90% Black. There was the private school, which was significantly better, which was mostly white. And then you have other things in the town where there are people that owned a lot, like most of the good property in the town, that refused to rent it to Black families. So the town was actually almost completely segregated, where there was the Black section of town, which was not very good, and the white section of town, which was significantly better. And when I look at instances like that, I see like that to me is an example of systemic racism. It was a system that was developed way, way, way back in the day, probably 100 years ago, in which people have built on top of, but it started in a frankly deeply racist society, which was all about keeping people in their place, keeping people separate. And because everything has been built on top of that, elements of that still remain today. Now, I think there could absolutely, and I don't know if this town is still in the same place as I saw it 20 years ago, but I mean, 20 years ago is still relatively recent, and it's after the period when we all thought racism was, fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there could be arguments made to go and look at situations like that are there is a fundamental inequity of opportunity in that environment where the white kids have, all these opportunities available to them that the Black kids do not. That is wrong. That is not okay with me. And I think that we can make arguments for, okay, how do we dismantle the things that brought us to this reality to make sure that every single person growing up in this town has the same access to opportunity? That's a conversation you can have. So that's my example.
Yeah. And, it's a good example. And there's reason to think that it might still be in that town, even though it was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so there isn't anybody I know that wouldn't say that's an issue. And yet, here's the irony. I think if you call it systemic racism, you actually will make solving the problem even harder. I
agree with you on that. I do, because then it becomes all about the label.
Yes, that's exactly what my point is.
Mm-hmm.
We focus so much on the label, and then the label is so useful when a George Floyd thing happens. And so it lends itself as a power tool, and that's why I have concerns about using a term, even if for a certain incident it would be accurate. I want another term for it. I just want to.
I can get on board with that, because for me, the main goal should be to solve the problem.
Exactly.
If we need to call something, we need to create a branding exercise out of it, fine. You'll have like zero argument for me on that. And I do agree that when we throw the labels out, it becomes a battle of whose label is correct and who we agree with. And I also think that and I'm even seeing this in the chat right now, live right in front of me, is that if people don't like the label, they will find if the right doesn't like that the left has put this label on something, they don't even want to dig into the details of why that might be true. They just want to fight against the label. They say, no, there is no such thing. And they put their blinders on to certain realities. I'm sorry, conservatives, that do absolutely exist. And so if we need to call it something else, that's fine. But I guess my biggest issue is I wanted to see us get to a place where we are actually more interested in solving problems than we are with fighting with each other. Because that's what it is. That's what this whole thing is. Oh. Howard, you okay over there?
Yeah, I am. I just got to take some water.
Oh, careful.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. I'm big on the branding. I think how we label things and how we describe things is so key to all of this. And if I could see us making a shift the way we need to, it would be in how we refer to things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. You okay?
I got something caught in my throat.
Oh no. Oh
I'm
no.
sorry.
No. You're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
You can take a sec if you want.
No, you talk.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm just gonna go through the chat and see what you guys are saying. Let's see. Okay, we have a super chat from Nicholas. Thank you. And guys, if I didn't get to your super chat, I do apologize. A lot because it kind of disappears off the screen after a while and I can't access it. But thank you to everyone who's given super chats today. Nicholas says people don't understand schema and people need better training on how to control schemes. My sci-fi book uses schema and people have been able to manipulate their schema within the story. I'm not quite sure what that means.
I don't either. I'm curious. What's schema?
I'm not sure. Nicholas, maybe if you want to chat in some clarification, that would be fantastic. So no, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me that you know, like I did marketing professionally for like 10 years before I do what I do now. And marketing is all about branding, right? It's all about image. It's all about labels. And I've even argued that I think that, oh God, I'm going to get myself in trouble now, Howard. I argued that that I would actually be in favor of some form of reparations, but I think reparations are more of like a branding exercise. First, I think it's about figuring out what the best investment of the money is, because money can fix a lot of problems. I absolutely am convinced that there is a way that we can make monetary investments that would support more Black men staying at home and being a father figure to their kids, because that is a really big problem in the Black community. And so if we can figure out a way to make investments to support that goal, branded as reparations, fine.
Right.
And then we kind of take the issue off the table. So, I mean, is this a branding exercise? I don't know.
I think that where everything is a movement, there's always branding. So yes, it is a branding exercise. I came across a new term, was Black Lives Matter, and then last week I heard the term All Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
I thought that was a really good thing, because what happens when you see an incident of one Black man getting murdered, and then immediately you hear what happened in Chicago or other cities where there could have been multiple murders, and you don't hear about those. And if you bring that up there, you can get in trouble. People will take offense, like you're not looking at the issue the right way. So on the off chance I'm not looking at the issue the right way, I'll consider that. And you could tell in my voice, I think I am looking at the issue the right way, because I'm trying to think, if we really care about all Black lives, we care about all Black lives.
Yeah.
And the numbers are greater in the inner city problems, and because I think the leadership in those cities, I think there is no leadership. I think there's cowardice by those leaders. They're not addressing the thing that you're talking about, which is an intact family for Blacks, and there's disproportionate problems there. And here I'm talking carefully, because you could be racist for bringing that up.
Right.
So I want to hear how to bring that up. I don't care how it's brought up, so long as it's brought up and so long as it's dealt with. And whatever racist thing that's in me that shouldn't be there, shame on it. I hope it goes away. But until that ever goes away, let's don't not let's solve the problem though.
Mm-hmm.
Let's don't get caught up in whether I'm a racist or not, or you're a racist, or anybody's a racist.
And that's exactly the thing. And I think you know, one of the things that I take issue with is pushing back. I like the term all Black Lives Matter quite a bit actually, because it, you know, to me, one of the things that I really try not to engage in is this Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter thing. You will very
Right.
rarely hear me say the term All Lives Matter, except if I'm criticizing the term All Lives Matter, because I think it fundamentally just sets it up as a pissing contest.
Right.
Honestly.
Right.
And there's no win there. But if you take Black Lives Matter and transform it into all Black Lives Matter, well, then you get to have a more nuanced conversation about what that means.
I was impressed with it, and I wanted to embrace it, and I think it has a lot of solution quality to it. And I hope I'm right. I like sharing it on a platform like yours because you have a wide readership, and maybe a term like that gets said more. And then to go juxtapose to what I was talking about before, if you're in a situation and it's a little dicey with the tension that's in the conversation, and you say, well, there's a lot of people, there's lots of ways to think about that. Pause the question, you pause the discussion. People look at you, and you might follow it up with, because I think that all Black lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even if you're in a very tense, tension-filled discussion, it's hard for me to think that it wouldn't pause the discussion enough to that other people say, you know what, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. And then you can follow it up and say, I think I'm right about a lot of things that I'd like to be able to discuss, but I have a hard time discussing with it because you can get in trouble for saying the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that actually terrifies me the most about this type of training making its way into organizations, because psychological safety is the number one driver of a productive team in organizations. Psychological
Right.
safety is that you trust one another. You
Right.
have each other's backs. You're having open communication. You're able to throw ideas out and know that your team's not going to throw you under the bus. And then you infuse this toxic ideology into it, and all of a sudden, people are constantly questioning in their heads, like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is someone going to be offended by it? And it's going to absolutely destroy teamwork in organizations. Like, mark my words, teams that implement this are not going to be successful in the job that they're actually paid to do.
Yeah, one of the things about a team is the different things that are brought to it. There's a unifying thing about being a team, but there's also a diversified thing about being a team. By diversified, I mean diversified thinking. We don't talk about diversification in thinking enough. I just wrote an article for Medium called "Why Doesn't Anybody Think Like You?" And I'm making a point that everybody thinks uniquely. Nobody can line up on everything all the time, and you bring a team together because of that, not in spite of it.
Right. Right. And I'm actually working on a diversity statement for organizations right now that's all about ensuring true diversity in the organization, which is not just about race or gender or any of these immutable characteristics. It's also about diversity of thought, diversity of approach, and even
Sure.
frankly saying we are going to open and welcome everyone regardless of their political beliefs. If you are coming in and you are doing your job and you are being a good teammate and you are contributing productively, then you have a place here. It does not matter who you vote for in November.
Yeah. We're talking about revolutions, and the American Revolution was, a standout revolution, of course. But the thing that it brought out was in the First Amendment was the freedom of speech. It is so, I don't think enough could be said about that's actually what is holding our republic together more than anything else. So when you look at cancel culture that says we're against speech. Now think about speech, freedom of speech. Countries, always tried to corral its citizenry to never speak against it. Never speak against it. So so that was their approach to keeping anarchy from happening. The American Republic did something different. The American Republic said, you can say that you don't like it. Now, you can't burn property. You can't incite murdering other people. But you can speak whatever you need to speak and see where it goes from there. Mm-hmm. How confident do you think a country has to feel in what revolution it created when it says you can say what you want to say, and we won't prevent you from doing that?
I think this is actually a perfect time for Carol's super chat, because Carol says, this is America. We are Americans. This is the real privilege, and we must preserve it for everyone.
Because I love, you know, that we were talking about white privilege. I think it should be called American privilege.
Yes.
I think that's so, I mean, I have problems with that term, white privilege. And by the way, thank you, Carol, for that. I love what you said. Things, you know, always be careful what you wish for. If white privilege as an idea takes hold, by its very definition, the white privilege will not have privilege anymore. Mm-hmm. What do you think it's like? I mean, I don't have any offense about it, really, but I could see a point where if the whole idea of white privilege really takes hold, I'll be in a world where people look at me, they'll say, there's an old white guy, and assume certain things about me. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean white privilege? It means I'm going to have prejudice against me, just like you've claimed I've had against everybody else. Well, the term itself turns on itself.
It's so funny because I took a couple weeks ago this quiz from BuzzFeed about like, how privileged are you? And one of the questions it asks is like, you never have to think about your race. And I was like, until a couple of years ago, that was absolutely true.
That's right. That's the point. And you know, maybe that went over my head. That might have been the point. You know, how does it feel? Mm-hmm. And I suppose there's something that could be said, like, you know, you don't understand what it's like to be Black or Hispanic or whatever, woman, you know, and then someone starts, you know, pointing a finger. Yeah. And I go, okay, all right, great. Point well made. Can we go back to now just being people, you know, now that you made your point?
Well, it's funny because did you know, and this is something that's been going around a lot lately, did you know that they're in the process in your state of California of repealing civil rights protections based on immutable characteristics? It's already passed the assembly.
You know what? I feel embarrassed. I think I know something about it, but yeah. I don't want to pretend I know more than I do. What are the details of that?
I think, oh gosh, I wish I had it up on my screen, but essentially it's a bill related to like the title has affirmative action in it, but when you actually read the bill, what they've done is they are repealing parts of, I think, the Constitution. Like, please, guys, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I think it's the Constitution that protects from discrimination based on race and gender and sexual orientation. They're repealing those.
Well, welcome to California.
I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
I mean,
amazing.
That to me is terrifying. That's terrifying. That this would, and it's funny because when you share it, and Tim Pool actually has a video about this where he shared this information with some of his friends on the left, and because they put affirmative action in the title of the bill, people assume it's a good thing because they want affirmative action. But then he's like, no, read the bill. This has nothing to do with affirmative action.
Yeah, I'm not as educated about this particular one, but that's very typical in California.
I have it, actually.
Yeah, the names of the bills always sound really good, but if you read them, they're horrible.
Let me see if I can pull this up. Actually, while I'm pulling this up, Howard, maybe we have a super chat. We have one more that you can maybe answer, which is from Matthew. And Matthew says, I counsel at a private school for kids with behavior problems. I use CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm concerned that the push for individual perceptions ruling the day, I will no longer be able to use it. Any advice? I think you can still use it.
Don't throw away cognitive behavioral approach. I'm not sure why would that challenge using cognitive behavior?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think the cognitive behavioral approach is really one of the only proven methods of, I mean, the only thing that's been proven to actually show results, right?
No, I mean, when pressed with what I do, that's what I explain that I do. And I think that the person wrote in should stick with cognitive behavior. I think that he will forever be challenged, whether it's with the school system or the kid he's working with. And that's what cognitive behavior is for, is to sort through all of those challenges.
Yeah. All right, Howard, we'll do this, and then maybe we can probably wrap it up because we've been going for a minute. But just so you know, this is the California Repeal Proposition 209 Affirmative Action Amendment. And so the measure would repeal Section 31 of Article 1 of the California Constitution. The following struck-through text would be repealed. And so here's what they're repealing. The state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. This section shall only apply to actions taken after the section's effective date. Nothing in this section shall be interpreted based on So, I mean, you basically get the idea. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that first one is what they're repealing. That the state shall not discriminate or grant preferential treatment based on sex, race, color, ethnicity, or national origin. Nope, repealed.
Okay, well,
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's up for they're considering in the assembly, right?
No, it's already passed the assembly.
Oh, it passed.
Passed the assembly.
Oh, well, then I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to me is just it's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing.
So, FYI, you're planning to move out of California in your head right now, I bet.
You know, it's funny. I think about stuff like that. I love this state. It's a great state. I grew up here. I think I'm gonna just fight it through.
All right, you're gonna fight the good fight.
I'm gonna try.
Before we conclude, I'm gonna take a really off-topic question, and Howard, you're gonna not know what's going on, I don't think, but Gabe says, debate Vosh. When Vosh stops stalking me on Twitter and pretending he doesn't have a massive crush on me and that's why he's doing it, then maybe I'll consider a conversation. I've also put out to Vosh that if he wants to debate me on the topic of white fragility and its effectiveness, then bring it. I will debate him on that topic. So, completely off topic side note of the day. I have a Twitter stalker that I'm in a little bit of a feud with. And I fully acknowledge I'm behaving like a child in this situation, but he's behaving like a child too.
No, that was fun. That was fun. Thanks for sharing.
All right, Howard, do you have any closing thoughts before we conclude this round?
I would just pay attention to what's going on. I think it's very significant that we started to see these statues coming down by the mob, and it should be considered unacceptable. And whatever you can do, voice your opinion that highlights the danger and destruction of the mob. That's what I would leave everyone with.
Yeah. All right. Well, this will certainly not be the last time we chat on this topic. And Howard and I will always let you know when we're going to have another one of these conversations. I think these conversations are really important. We are going to be trying to bring other psychologists and mental health professionals into the conversation. So please reach out if you want to be a part of it. I already have a list of some people who reached out to me. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider subscribing to my channel, giving it a thumbs up. If you think you're subscribed, double check that. YouTube may have made the decision for you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing this. I think these conversations are more important now than ever.
Thank you for what you're doing, Carlin. I love talking with you.
Well, thank you, Howard. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll be back at you very, very soon. Bye.